I recently taught a class to some first-year medical students at, an academic medical institution. And we gave them the data. And then we gave them a case of a Black pregnant person who had an uneventful pregnancy, delivered the baby, had to be a C-section though, went home, kept calling back to the office saying, hey, I'm having symptoms. And they were like, oh, well, that's just your chronic hypertension. Or, oh, everybody has a little swelling. Or, oh, just take some Tylenol for your headache. And then this woman died. And the medical students were like, I'm confused. We're taught in medical school that if you have neurological changes like vision change, headache, that's an emergency.
Yes.
Go to the emergency room.
Yes.
Why did this happen? This can't be real. And then we told them and shared the story of Dr. Shalon Irving, who worked for the CDC, who worked on maternal mortality, and how that's exactly how she died. And so we have to not just say the data, but we have to get over that disconnect of, in the United States, it can't be this way. It is this way.
UnControlled Substance. UnControlled Substance.
Welcome to Uncontrolled Substance with your host, Dr. Cozzette Lyons-Jones, Chief of Adult Medicine for the Watts Healthcare Corporation.
UnControlled Substance.
Hello. Welcome back to Uncontrolled Substance. This is episode 20, Dying to Have a Baby, the state of Black maternal health in the U.S. is the subject for today. We're going to hit it hard. I want to start this episode off with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. This particularly rings true in the area of Black infant and maternal health in the United States. Episode 20 will hit this, and the reason being is because we just passed Black Maternal Health Week.
Yes.
The annual observance. It was the 5th year. This is a campaign that was started by the Black Mamas Matter Alliance to promote awareness and foster action surrounding the state of Black maternal health in the U.S. The theme this year is Building for Liberation, centering Black mamas, Black families, and Black systems of care. The observance shines a national spotlight on conversations about sexual health, maternal health, and reproductive health care for women of color. The CDC defines maternal mortality as which is pregnancy-related death, as the death of a woman while pregnant or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy. In the U.S., maternal mortality impacts Black pregnant women birthing people at a disparate rate, with Black mothers nearly 4 times as likely than white mothers to die from pregnancy-related causes.
Wow.
Black women also are at 1.7 times greater risk of having a preterm birth compared to white women. California, where we are, right, has one of the lowest maternal mortality rates in the country. But Black mothers still have a higher maternal mortality rate compared to other racial groups, even here. Pregnancy-related deaths for Black women was 56 deaths per 100,000 births, 4 to 6 times greater than the maternal mortality rate of other racial groups. The CDC notes that there are several factors contributing to this disparity that we're looking at, and they include inequitable treatment in healthcare, structural racism, underlying chronic conditions, implicit bias, and social determinants of health. The term implicit bias is used to describe unconscious attitudes toward certain people or assigning stereotypes to them. Implicit bias is not the only contributing factor, but it's a major one that needs to be discussed and addressed in order to impact Black women and women of color's mortality, improve things in that area, right? Death rates for infants born to Black Americans with advanced degrees, like myself, college, grad school,
Yeah.
are higher than white Americans who didn't go to high school. And being a highly educated doctor doesn't give you a pass, you know? Case in point, Dr. Shanice Wallace was a fourth-year pediatric chief resident at the Indiana University School of Medicine and was working at Riley Children's Health Hospital at the time of her death. She died from complications after an emergency C-section in the setting of preeclampsia. And let's not forget the high-profile celebrity example of tennis great Serena Williams. Hate to say it, but being black trumps class, education, and celebrity for black birthing mothers in America. It's a shame.
It's incredible. You know, what up, everyone?
Yes.
But I'm very happy to talk about this topic today. Usually, I look at these topics of disparities, especially in our community, and it's tough to find that solution at the level of the problem. You know, we talk about incarceration, but you're not, in my opinion, going to solve that at the law enforcement level. You know, you got to solve that at education. You got to solve that at family support. This one, though, seems like there's something society should be able to do about it. This one is just looking at the research that you did and looking at what I found. There doesn't seem to be a reason that black women, highly educated, higher income, this is not a class issue. It's incredible. Have worse outcomes.
Right. The United States is the only industrialized nation where black maternal health is getting worse.
Wow.
Complaints of pain are too often dismissed, as an example. There's data that shows that after C-sections, black women don't have their pain adequately managed at the same rate as white women. And we see that across the board, not just here. We've talked about this before, and the myths that are out there that they're still teaching in some of these archaic med schools, you know, to the little kiddos that are coming out to treat you and I, right? That we have thicker skin.
Don't scare me.
Yeah, your skin's thick because you're darker. My man is dark skinned, by the way, and I'm high yellow, but I guess I'm a little bit darker than the average white person, so I'm a little thicker too. I don't know. It's all crazy, right? But it's a shame. I do appreciate that the White House actually chimed in and you know, took up the mantle on this. Kamala Harris in particular and President Biden, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, it's incredible to look at this and to say that it's so deep seated in people don't even realize what they're doing, you know, in the examination room, for example, or even, you know, your care begins before you even enter the examination room. It begins when you try to make the appointment and you're calling about a symptom as a pregnant woman. You know, I have a headache, or you know, I don't feel so good right now, and it's dismissive, you know, from the front desk, you know, from the person that's answering the phone. And so we have to address it at all levels, the entire care team, you know. So I don't want to just attack doctors. I want to attack everybody, the system, on this one, because it will take correction across the board, not just at the point of care, to rectify what we're seeing in this country.
And in this country, it's incredible, but even going past black mothers to all mothers, our country doesn't do well with maternity. Yeah. And so now you got to look a little past the color, even though the color, it shows up in the numbers, no doubt. But now, is this a gender thing? I mean, why are we hurting the people who are bearing children? Usually you think of that, a pregnant mother
It's
is
sacred.
on a pedestal.
Yes, it's sacred, right?
So what is going on
She should
in
be
this
safe.
country?
That should be the one time in America that I'm the most safe and protected.
No matter what your color is, you are a mother to be.
Yeah.
You should be wrapped with love and attention and care.
Absolutely. So when we talk about causes of death, we want to touch on that so that our listeners will be educated on, how are we dying? What is it that we're dying from? So when we look at the main causes, preeclampsia and eclampsia is on the list as leading underlying causes of death among Black women. And these are conditions that are associated with sudden spikes in blood pressure, preeclampsia in particular. And eclampsia is the progression. It's rare, but it's the progression from preeclampsia, where the person starts to have seizures or they can go into a coma. It's the extreme end of it that puts a woman at risk during pregnancy. In addition to preeclampsia and eclampsia, embolism or clotting is the other one. So think of Serena Williams.
Yeah.
That was the condition that she was dealing with. She could have died in that scenario because they would not listen to her, although she had a history and a familiarity with that condition because of having had it before.
Absolutely.
So these are the leading causes. The health inequities are stark, and they exist across educational and socioeconomic factors, which is what we said up front. So we want to look at the fact that there are agencies like, say, the March of Dimes. The March of Dimes, they're looking at different scorecards and report cards. So I would draw your attention to the marchofdimes.org website and Google report card so that you can see how your state, how your county or your city compares to the national numbers. So preterm birth is defined as live birth before 37 completed weeks of gestation or pregnancy. California was rated a B with a preterm birth rate of 8.8% of live births born before, between 2017 and 2019, looking at that data. Now, if you break it down by race, it's 12.3 for Black women. So that's higher than the California percentage, right? It's 7.3 for white women and 9.1 for Hispanics. So Black women experience 44% higher than among all other women. It's pretty sad, right? And so when you look at things like preterm birth, that these are markers of the health of the society. So it's important to look at these things. When you look at infant mortality, the higher the infant mortality for a country, a state, a city, the worse the health, assessment is or scorecard is for the overall community. So you look at these things as markers to determine how well are you doing. How well are we taking care of our people?
How well are we taking care of our people?
Yeah. So this is serious. Infant mortality rate is 4.4 per 1,000 live births, right? Lower than, and that's in California, and that's lower than the U.S. rate of 5.6.
Okay.
Infant mortality rates, again, are indicators of overall health. Leading causes of infant death include birth defects, prematurity, low birth weight, maternal complications, and sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. We haven't heard that in a minute, but it's still, unfortunately, alive and well. I would draw your attention to that website so that you can really see how your area is doing, wherever you live in the country. It's important for you to know and understand, because that also will let you know what's going on, racially speaking, in your area. Go down south. It's crazy, when you start looking at those numbers. I don't know. This is a heavy topic, Mr. Jones.
Heavy topic, but again...
and it's personal for me.
Well, of course.
It's personal for me. As a physician, as a Black woman, as a mother, who had her own challenges, with trying to conceive and getting to our babies. My education didn't protect me. It didn't help me. the fact that we, had solid income and careers, it didn't help.
Insurance didn't help.
It didn't help. Yeah. Insurance didn't help. And I want to drive this. I know our listeners are probably like, why does she keep saying these things over and over again? Because I want to drive it. Just keep driving it till you get it. Because if we don't, who will, right? But I would say this. We have more to unpack. We have some stories we want to share, give some updates. We have some historic news that we want to celebrate with the rest of the nation on.
Yes.
Right? And we will do this in the waiting room after this station break.
Network is now streaming live on the World Wide Web at www.realurbanradio.com. Log on for the best old school in today's R&B. Can't get to a computer? No problem. Download our app from your smartphone app store. Just search for the Real Urban Radio Network. Download. Bam! Now take us everywhere you go. Also follow us on Twitter and Instagram by searching for us at Real Urban Radio 1. We keep it real 24/7 on the Real Urban Radio Network.
Uncontrolled Substance.
Welcome back to Uncontrolled Substance. This is episode 20, and we're looking at Black Maternal Health. We're in the waiting room, waiting for that doctor.
Uncontrolled Substance.
Getting tired of her. She's always late.
Been out here for an hour.
Yeah, but we want to jump right into this historic event that has happened since last we were on the air. The appointment of our dear sister, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yes.
Applause. Jackson has a range of experience. She clerked for Justice Stephen Breyer. She worked in a private practice, served on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, was a U.S. District Court judge before she was confirmed last year to the influential U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. She'd be the first justice since Thurgood Marshall with significant experience as a criminal defense attorney, a credential her supporters praised. Kudos. You know what? We always got to be better than the best, right?
You know what? Yeah, well, she was more than qualified.
Yes.
This happened the way it should have happened. It took too long to happen.
Yes.
But I'm not big on symbolism. Mm-hmm. I believe people should get what they deserve, and she deserved this.
Yes, she did.
And I applaud her.
Yes.
I applaud Biden for doing it.
Yeah, and staying true to his campaign
Absolutely.
promise. Yes, he kept that one.
And so kudos to her, and hopefully this opens it up for any other well-qualified black woman, black man. Who's next? A Latino man?
Yes.
Well,
maybe.
You know what? We should all be represented.
Right.
As long as we have the qualifications.
So, of course, for me, I had to go and research what's her record in the area of health.
In
right?
the area of health,
public
yes.
health. Biden's Supreme Court pick has expertise on drug sentencing, but it seems to be that she is not so, robust on the record as far as health issues.
Okay.
She hasn't done a ton of rulings or work in that space, right? So it's difficult to really predict, but you can, take a stab at it. On reproductive rights, during her clerkship, was under Senator Breyer, right?
Yeah.
He authored a 2000 decision striking down a Nebraska law banning partial birth abortion. As a law firm associate, Ms. Jackson co-authored a 2001 amicus brief in support of a Massachusetts law creating a buffer zone around people as they approach abortion clinics.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you a little peek, right?
I got you.
Into the future potentially. On her drug sentencing, she has deep expertise in that area.
Okay.
She spent 4 years on the bipartisan U.S. Sentencing Commission and helped rewrite guidelines to reduce recommended penalties for drug-related offenses. And this is all from the Washington Post article that came out February 28th, I believe.
Okay.
On her when her name was put up for a potential candidate at that time. But kudos to her. She helped rewrite these guidelines, and for me, it's awesome that she did that. She was right on time. As far as last summer, she was part of a 3-judge panel that allowed the CDC's pandemic-related eviction moratorium to continue.
Okay.
So she, got her foot wet with it, right?
She's liberal. One can say that, but at the same time, I'm a conservative. I agreed with those last two in terms of the drug sentencing. They had been ridiculously hard on sentencing certain drug offenses, people with certain drug offenses. And she's on the right side of history with that. Same thing with the pandemic-related eviction moratorium.
Absolutely. So, congratulations. History has been made. Warms my heart. Black girl magic.
I know. The door's a little more open, the path a little wider for one Lena Jones if she decides to go that route, right?
Plug for our daughter.
Yes.
Future Supreme Court Justice. Yes.
Alrighty. Well, I'm sitting here in the waiting room, and I see the Washington Post has an article.
Another one.
And this is an amazing one. The TSA stops mask enforcement after a federal judge voids the mandate. Wow, really? With Omicron exploding? But, anyway, federal officials stopped enforcement of a federal mask mandate Monday in transportation settings after a federal judge struck down the requirement, raising public health concerns and prompting several airlines to announce that face coverings are optional on domestic flights. In fact, I heard some pilots and flight attendants just announced it as the flight was in the air, which is crazy.
Gentle, right?
U.S. District Judge Catherine Kimball Mizell of the Middle District of Florida said the mandate exceeds the statutory authority of the CDC. Federal officials last week had extended the mask mandate for commercial flights and in other settings, including on buses, ferries, and subways, until at least May the 3rd. Wow.
But you know what? What about, I guess it was interesting. So it was about 1,000 people who were, banned from flying on United.
That's
after
right.
they,
Acted
refused to, they acted a fool and didn't want to abide by the rules and wear their mask. So they're allowing them to come back on, in light of this.
Whoa.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you knew about that.
I didn't know about that.
But they have to abide by the rules, whatever they are, right?
Weren't they kicked off for behavior, not because of the specific rule that they decided not to follow?
But that behavior also was them breaking the rules, which was the mask mandate that was in effect at that point.
Updating that article, on Wednesday, the Biden administration filed notice of plans to appeal that judge's decision, and that was they waited a little while before deciding that because that was fraught with problems on both sides.
Right.
The fact that they have decided to appeal now, the possible problem is if the justices at that level and above decide that this judge is right, that limits the power in the future for the federal government to mandate certain things. And it sets a precedent. And if that precedent is set, Omicron, COVID's not the last thing we're going to deal with. This is not the last time we're going to need the federal government to step in on something.
Right.
And if they lose this appeal, they might have less power in the future. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. That judge, he was a Trump-appointed federal judge?
Do you have to ask?
I just wanted to throw that out there, right? I know. I was, I knew the answer.
Yes.
I just wanted to put it out there. But, what's ridiculous about this is that, the variant that's on the horizon is supposedly 25% more contagious or infectious than the ones behind it, right? And this is the wrong time. We're seeing the numbers ramp up. There's an expectation that by the fall, we're going to be right back where we were before as far as, the numbers going up again. And for us to be so willy-nilly with the mask, You know, and we can look at Europe also because, you know, how they go is how we eventually end up going, you know, in most cases. And I just think it's not wisdom to act like that. And so what's confusing is now all the mixed messages, because now you have to go county by county, state by state, county by county. It differs from block to block, you know, as to what the rules are.
We don't see really exactly eye to eye on the mask mandates or any of that, really. But we see perfectly eye to eye on what you just mentioned, that confusion.
Yeah.
And my biggest pet peeve, and you know has been the public health stance on this from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And more than that, how the politicians, our elected officials, have allowed public health to step in the gap where they should have been. And now public health is the one that people are pointing at saying, you're confusing us. They're the ones that people don't trust, where public health are the scientists, the administrators that really look at the data, and what they should be doing is giving recommendations, strong recommendations, staying on message, and then letting the politicians go back and forth on the mandates.
But don't get amnesia. Under Trump, you know what happened.
What happened?
They politicized things that should not have been political.
Yeah.
My health should not be politicized, right? As far as a mask or not to mask. You know, a badge of honor to stand in this hall with the rest of my, you know, cronies, my conservative cronies, is to not have your mask on. Give me a break.
I'm with
So, you know,
I'm with you.
Don't
But
throw,
I think
don't completely throw the public health people under the bus with your statements.
I'm throwing the politicians under the bus because they allowed it. They're the ones that actually make the decisions.
I'm with you.
They make the decisions, but who do they put out front? The
scapegoats.
the director
The
of
scapegoats.
California Public Health or Los Angeles County Public Health. She's out front. Dr. Fauci is out front.
Poor
and then
baby.
people think he's the one
Yeah.
that's pulling all the levers.
Yeah.
It's our elected officials that were cowards.
So the BA.2 Omicron subvariant is responsible for most of the new COVID infections in the U.S. It's referred to as stealth Omicron because it contains genetic mutations that can make it harder to distinguish from the Delta variant using PCR tests. It looks like Delta when detected. It's 30 to 60% more transmissible. So it's a risk to skyrocket the number of cases, but it's not more severe. And you have the vaccine on board to mitigate the severity and lower the death rates. So we're going to see the numbers ramp up, you know, even in the face of being vaccinated. However, you won't see the death counts. But keep in mind, what I don't like about the mask thing being so willy-nilly the way it is the fact that when you look, everyone is like, it's like the flu. You know, I'm tired of hearing that. I don't want to hear that. Because in an average flu season, about 30 to 50,000 cases, you know, of death related to flu occur. Right. Omicron alone killed 150,000.
Yeah. I got
Give
you.
me a break. I don't want to hear
you.
miss me with all that. Okay.
I got you.
So I just want us to also keep in mind that masks are not the only things that can protect us against the ongoing threats of the pandemic, right? So you have one of the most important interventions is acquiring better ventilation, you know, with superior filtration capabilities. I was looking at an article in the New York Times, the coronavirus briefings that they put out. This actually was today.
Yes.
You know, it comes to my mailbox every day. And what I appreciated about it is that it put the responsibility on both sides.
Yeah.
On not only the people, you know, to wear the mask or not to wear the mask, and, you know, to social distance, to wash your hands, you know, to stay your butt at home when you know you're sick, you know, things like that. But also on people who own the buildings, who have the ability to go and update their infrastructure to make it COVID safe.
Okay.
Right? For people at high risk, especially immunocompromised people, you want to minimize viral spread, you know? So you want to do those things. Germicidal ultraviolet light is even more effective than filtration, for example. There are ways that building owners can make indoor environments safer by disinfecting the indoor air. But I liked what they asked. They said it's a classic pandemic conundrum, is what the New York Times said. Is it my responsibility or is it society's responsibility, right?
That's what it comes down to, right?
I'm not happy.
But this is the society we live in. So then what we want to do, I think, is tailor our response to the society that we live in. That puts more onus on individual people. But so the government then still has its responsibility, but it needs to maximize those. Like they gave the schools a bunch of money for filtration. That's great. But at the same time, public health, get in people's ear with a consistent message. Go outside and have a good time. Wear your mask if you're vulnerable. Right. We're the best type of mask.
Right.
Just a consistent message.
Yes, absolutely. But let's put a pin in it. We have a great guest waiting for us. I'm just so excited about her. It's my friend, but she is the truth in the space of health equity, social justice, health justice, Dr. Valencia Walker.
Fantastic.
But we're going to take a station break. Join us back momentarily, people. Stay tuned. Don't go away.
Right.
On Uncontrolled Substance, the Real Urban Radio Network.
Uncontrolled substance.
Welcome back to Uncontrolled Substance, and we're going to jump right into the examination room. We're tired of this doctor. We got to let this doctor have it today. And we want to really dig deep into this really important topic.
Yes.
We have a wonderful guest, my friend, peer, mentor in many ways. And, I just love her all the way around. Powerful force. Dr. Valencia Walker is our guest on today. And she actually is a past president of the Association of Black Women Physicians, the organization that I am currently a part of as president, the 31st president, I believe, this year. Dr. Valencia Walker serves as the Associate Chief Diversity and Health Equity Officer for Nationwide Children's Hospital. Additionally, she holds joint appointments as Associate Division Chief of Health Equity and Inclusion for the Division of Neonatology and Vice Chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Department of Pediatrics at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. She's a practicing neonatologist, a champion for the elimination of health inequities for pregnant people and their infants. So she's the perfect person to have on the show on today. A physician leader within organized medicine, Dr. Walker is a member of the executive committee for the AAP's section on minority health equity and inclusion, in addition to her current position as program chair for the section. Previously, she served as president, like I said, of ABWP. She has completed undergraduate studies at Florida A&M University and received her medical degree from Emory University School of Medicine. I mean, her resume can go on and on.
It goes on and on.
It goes on and on, but it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Black brilliance. Welcome, Dr. Valencia Walker.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're excited. We've been trying to get you on the show for a while. You fit in a number of topics previously, so I'm just glad that during this great observance of Black Maternal Health Week that has just passed this month, that you are able to come on and we can continue the conversation beyond the 1 week observance.
Absolutely.
Want to jump right into it? Can you explain how the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the Black maternal death rates to more than twice the national average, higher than pre-pandemic levels? It's incredible.
There are so many ways that we can take this, but I think what you really focused in on is COVID-19. And the fact that COVID-19 had a real impact on Black communities, on indigenous communities, on certain Asian communities. And everything changed with COVID. Everything had to change.
Yes.
But there was so much misinformation out there. There was so much difficulty in figuring out what to do and how to do it well.
Right.
And let's just start with something simple. People get stressed, people get overworked, and it's hard to perform at your best. And if we knew that prior to COVID-19 that Black women weren't being listened to, that Black pregnant people were ignored or thought or seen as less than and judged, what do you think is going to happen when you have people that are just running around just trying to figure it out, some of them being, you know, taken from labor and delivery where they normally work to somewhere else? Like, there were so many factors that came together, and at the same time, because there was so much misinformation and so much fear, people didn't always know where to go to get the care they needed.
Yes.
And when they needed care, it wasn't always available. I mean, what we saw over and over again was that the concerns and health of pregnant people and children were intentionally deprioritized. Now, there's some reality, but then there's also convenience. There's also doing what we've always done. And I think that's one of the importance of Black Maternal Health Week, because we have to stand up and say, we matter.
Right.
Pay attention to us.
Right.
We have to do things differently.
Now, that leads me to another question. Hope I don't make you, mad or anything with this one. The U.S. rate
Well,
of...
I thought we were in the exam room and the physician was already mad and frustrated.
Well, the physician is mad, but the patient shouldn't be incited because of my anger, right? But the U.S. rate of maternal death is more than twice as high as it is in nations of comparable wealth. According to the CDC, nearly 60% of these deaths are preventable. How is that, Valencia?
Well, first of all, let's point out the fact that people think when we prioritize Black pregnant people, that somehow other people are going to get less. But what we're saying is that the situation for the health of pregnant people is dire. I mean, we are not even at the level of some quote-unquote developing countries. That's how bad it is here. It's not safe to be pregnant in the United States.
Yes.
And we have to call it out just like that. But this is where you start to understand when Dr. Kamara Jones talks about the definition of racism. At the end of her definition, she talks about how it saps the strength of the entire society. Dr. Martin Luther King has a beautiful quote about how our lives are all interconnected, and I can't be my best if you're not your best.
Yes.
Why we have to fix these issues is for the exact statistic that you cited. Everyone is suffering when it comes to being pregnant in the United States. And we have the evidence about how Black people suffer the most. So I know a lot of people don't like this analogy, but it's true. If you see literally the building collapsing on fire and people struggling to get out, then you have to race to the place where the rescue has to happen immediately, even as you put things in place to prevent these fires from happening and destroying communities.
It's okay.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
These numbers were incredible when I looked at them.
I mean, the numbers are sickening.
Yeah.
They're horrifying.
Yeah.
And they're heartbreaking. I recently taught a class to some first-year medical students at, an academic medical institution. And we gave them the data. And then we gave them a case of a Black pregnant person who had an uneventful pregnancy, delivered the baby, had to be a C-section though, went home, kept calling back to the office saying, hey, I'm having symptoms. And they were like, oh, well, that's just your chronic hypertension. Or, oh, everybody has a little swelling. Or, oh, just take some Tylenol for your headache. And then this woman died. And the medical students were like, I'm confused. We're taught in medical school that if you have neurological changes like vision change, headache, that's an emergency. Go to the emergency room.
Yes.
Why did this happen? This can't be real. And then we told them and shared the story of Dr. Shalon Irving, who worked for the CDC, who worked on maternal mortality, and how that's exactly how she died. And so we have to not just say the data, but we have to get over that disconnect of, in the United States, it can't be this way. It is this way.
Dr. Walker, we have about 2 minutes, but I wanted to ask you, the CDC listed structural racism, inequality in healthcare, and comorbidities as key contributors to the Black birthing crisis in the United States. How does each contribute to the current disparity, and would you add other causes to the list? And one other cause that I would look at is implicit bias.
So basically, let's start with racism. Racism drives all of those things. Racism creates the racialized implicit biases that people don't know they're acting on. But that's how we set up our systems, our media, our history, who gets to tell the story. So you start with racism at the core. And then you see how racism drives all these different things. Racism has determined through segregation and redlining where people live, the value of their property. Property taxes determine how schools are funded, where hospitals are built, where you have access to green space. All those things that we know make a difference in health outcomes for the better. So if we have systematically made populations vulnerable to worse health outcomes because of racism, and we are not doing things at an accelerated pace to reverse them, then we understand how poverty, lack of education, lack of opportunity, lack of access to insurance, because insurance is tied to your employment status.
Exactly.
How all these things work together to create these racialized health disparities.
Exactly. Now, that explains the theme for this year's Black Maternal Health Week, which was building for liberation, centering the Black mamas, Black families, and Black systems of care. You have to look at it from the individual to the family unit to the societal level and beyond to address it and unpack it. It's a lot to unpack in that title, right? In your opinion, what is the significance of this chosen theme?
I love this theme. It's a lot to unpack, but it's so grounded in truth. Liberation is about freedom from all of the things that have tried to prevent us from surviving and thriving. But the idea that it has to be centering our needs. And people underestimate how important our family structures are, because we have this notion that you have to have a mama and a daddy and a house and a white picket fence and a dog. But you were raised by your great auntie. Your uncle was your big brother. You can't tell me that my best friend is not a part of my family when she's been in my life for almost 20 years.
Yes.
And understanding the power of connection and community, and that we are responsible for each other, and that we are the experts when it comes to what our community needs, and that we have to shift that paradigm so that it serves us and doesn't harm us. That's that celebration of liberation.
Yes. Now, hold it right there. We got to pay the bills, so we'll take a break, just a brief break, and then we'll go into the checkout. We want you to stay online with us and go into the checkout with us, Dr. Valencia, okay?
Absolutely.
All righty. We'll be back momentarily on Uncontrolled Substance on the Real Urban Radio Network. Stay tuned.
Uncontrolled Substance.
Radio Network is looking for the next big media star, aka radio DJ, radio host. If you're interested in hosting your very own radio show, send an email of interest to info@realurbanradio.com. We're a Black-owned company that's an extension of the community. The platform was created for you to say what's really on your mind with no pushback. If you're the person we're looking for, contact us via email and let's have a discussion. The email again is info@realurbanradio.com. We look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, time, check us out at realurbanradio.com or download the app from your app store by searching for Real Urban Radio Network.
Uncontrolled substance.
Welcome back to Uncontrolled Substance on the Real Urban Radio Network. We are in the checkout with our guest, Dr. Valencia Walker. Welcome back, Dr. Walker.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I have one more question for you before we give our prescription for the show. Black babies are more likely to be born early or to die in the first year of life, right? Black women are about 4 times as likely to die in delivery or in the first year of life, right?
First year postpartum.
Postpartum life of the baby. The care received is not always equitable. What role does toxic stress play in the poor maternal and infant health outcomes among blacks?
You know, this is the checkout. We are constantly being exposed to racism. We are constantly being exposed to racialized mistreatment. We are constantly being exposed to misogynoir, specifically targeted towards Black women. And we know through concepts such as allostatic load and weathering,
Right.
that it takes a cumulative toll day after day, year after year. And there's a beautiful documentary that just came out that also talks about how we are always the caretakers. Even as young girls, we become the caretakers and take on all this additional burden. And we worry about our daddies, our brothers, our cousins. You know, we carry so much. That is difficult, and it definitely shifts our health outcomes. And it's even harder for us to advocate in those spaces where, again, where we started this conversation, people aren't seeing us or listening to us. And we have to understand that stress, even when we have conditioned ourselves not to feel it, not to cry, it's still there, and it's still creating those health problems.
Now, this was a new frontier for my husband as far as the topic.
Absolutely.
Did you want to add anything before we do our final words and offer some advice and things?
Well, the thing that struck me, and I'll be very brief, but the thing that struck me is a lot of the disparities and issues that we have as a community seem, in my opinion, to come more from class than racism at this point in time. And again, the classism is because of racism, because of slavery, because of Jim Crow, redlining and all of that. But this issue, and Dr. Walker, especially in the question I asked her, laid it out so well. And this last question, this is where you see the pure, blatant racism. Because the classism isn't there. We're talking Serena Williams.
Right.
Well, I was going to say, let me give you a real quote. What we see is that once you get past a college degree, once a Black woman gets a PhD, a MD, a JD, her risk of dying, her risk of her baby dying, exponentially increases above all other categories.
That's incredible.
A white woman with a high school degree, a Black woman with a high school degree, a white woman with a PhD, a white woman with a college degree, it doesn't matter. So to your point, you would think someone with this advanced degree has higher health literacy,
Absolutely.
higher income,
Yes.
has access to good insurance,
Yes.
has education, lives in the right neighborhood, so is not influenced by neighborhood.
Yes.
And none of those things are protected.
That's what
and
struck
that's
me.
when you know just how vile racism is.
And I mean, earlier in the show, we brought up about Dr. Shanice Wallace, one of our own, who we paid homage to at her passing. For me, that hits home, that you're not even safe as a physician, you know, in the profession, to be able to navigate and advocate for yourselves from a place of knowledge, from a position of, I know what's happening to me. I understand the differentials that you're running. I can interpret and translate just like the people who are treating me, and yet I am still at risk.
Scary.
So the research study I want to do one day, you know, we have all this data about all these differences, but I would love to do a focused study on Black women physicians and our own health outcomes. Because we already we've already talked about what Black women traditionally take on in the caretaker role.
Yeah.
And then the extra burden that many of us feel as Black women physicians. And then we understand that data, and we understand the impact of weathering and allostatic load. That's a story that needs to be told.
That's strong, Dr. Walker.
Absolutely. And I would add to that as an example, a living example. For me, I just remember going through training and early in my career, seeing so many women of color in particular struggling to conceive. Myself in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we miscarried twice before my daughter. And I remember with my daughter, it was a complicated pregnancy.
Yes.
And, you know, the amniotic fluid wasn't around her appropriately. And I was going at lunchtime with the intent of going back to work, right? Going to my prenatal visit at lunchtime. And he's like, she is supposed to be floating like a tadpole, and she's just sitting still. There's no fluid for her to float in. You need to go home. And I looked at him like, go home. You know, I'm at work, right? He was like, no, if you want this baby, you're going home. And for me, that third time is a charm. I was like, I have to go home.
Yes. Come home.
Come home. Come home, baby, was what my husband said. And I went home. And we have our brilliant
daughter. And look at
daughter.
the amazing person that your daughter is and what she is going to give to future generations.
Exactly.
So I want to interrupt and give you a quote as to why that decision you made is so important. So the person that I admire, Audre Lorde, self-care is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare.
Yes.
Wow.
It's revolutionary. And yet people don't see it that way. We've sacrificed ourselves so much as Black women across all, you know, sectors, not just in healthcare, for our families and our communities. And we're at a space where for once we're looking and saying we have to put the oxygen on ourselves when the plane is going down before we can help our kid. And that's the point of all of this conversation. I want to, you know, put a plug in there and a shout out to the Association of Black Women Physicians for taking on the battle to combat the disparity in African American infant and maternal mortality. We just couldn't sit out on this one, you know, as the data came out and as the crisis, you know, became more visible, you know, and our awareness of it. We said we definitely had to pick up this fight. We have a unique position of not only being medical providers for Black birthing people, but also potential victims ourselves, right?
There have been several of our members that have their own horrifying stories to share.
Yes. We convened a series of webinars in the Association of Black Women Physicians, one entitled of Overcoming Disparity in African American Infant and Maternal Mortality, to educate ourselves first, and then the community at large on the subject, starting with promoting anti-bias and anti-racist interactions in healthcare, because it starts there, and that can permeate across the board beyond, you know, obstetrics and gynecology and in pediatrics, even in terms of infant health. We note the import of social determinants of health. I mean, so much so that the March of Dimes, one of our partners, First 5 LA, in this whole space, we have taken on an awareness of the context in which we live as being so critical in formulating a plan, a care plan, and a strategy for attacking this problem.
Okay.
And when you look at the March of Dimes in particular, they do a scorecard by state, by city, by county, they look at different things in terms of indicators for infant mortality and maternal mortality. And one of the things that I thought was striking was their SVI, looking at the social determinants of health, and it's called the Social Vulnerable Index, I believe, SVI. And with the SVI, it's actually looking at, the context in which you live, where you live, where you play, where you work, where you eat, do you got a car, basic things. Because if you don't have a car, how do you get to the appointments, especially if there are no offices near your house, So all of these things factor in. So if you have a high SVI score, then you are at higher risk and you get a poorer or, a worse score overall from the March of Dimes in terms of the overall health of your state, city, county, city. So for us, I believe Los Angeles County is a B- on this scorecard, where they look at all these different indicators. Compare that to an A- in Irvine or Orange County area. Different demographic, different class,
That's right.
socioeconomic, so it gets to what my husband was bringing up earlier in terms of the economics behind the driving of this, but at the base of it is race. Racism, not race, racism. So I wanted to bring up just some of the good work that we've been doing as far as Association of Black Women Physicians. In the checkout, the prescription, because we don't want to leave with the doom and gloom. We want to offer our listeners some recommendations, some reading. Black Mamas Matter Alliance's website is a nice resource for people to go and keep up to date and get more information to delve deeper into this. Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty is one book that I would strongly recommend. Reproductive Justice, an Introduction, and Birthing Justice, Black Women, Pregnancy, and Childbirth are two other books that were listed at the Black Mamas Matter Alliance's website. So if you go there, you can see the different resources so that you can educate yourself about this and also empower yourselves as for those women of color who are listening to this show, this episode, to be able to walk into a doctor's office with greater confidence.
That's right. And
not feel like you could potentially become a victim because you don't understand what's happening to you and what's going on, and the interaction is below the level of dignity that it should have. Did you have any final words, Jones?
I think that last point is very strong in terms of a prescription for people. Advocate for yourself.
Right.
And then if things aren't going the way they should be going, continue to advocate. Do not be scared of the doctor. You and the doctor are partners in your own health, and you are the owner of your health.
Yes.
So go after it and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. The Serena Williams story, the other stories we've talked about, it's unbelievable because they did advocate.
Right.
And they were pushed back. But she went on and continued until they did the scans that they needed to do to save her life.
Absolutely. Dr. Walker, any last words?
So I'm going to say something that might seem unconventional. I want to remind people to celebrate Black joy. They want to constantly remind us that we are inferior, that we are less than, that we were not meant to survive. And yet we do.
I love it.
So find those moments to celebrate the joy of being Black.
Yes. Thank you so much. We will definitely bring you back on again because we need to delve into some other topics that I know you have expertise in and a heart and passion for. But thank you so much for coming on Uncontrolled Substance, sweetheart. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the work that you do.
Yes.
Thank
you for listening. This was episode 20. Can you believe it? 20?
All right.
We're chugging along. The little engine that could, right? Thank you, and we welcome you to come back and continue to join us on next month, every fourth Sunday of the month, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Uncontrolled Substance on the Real Urban Radio Network.
Uncontrolled Substance.
Thank you. God bless. Be safe out there, you all. Take care.
Uncontrolled Substance.